Welcome, folks. If you just came over from the CBN live that I just finished over on CBN News website, and it's about 8 p.m. here in Ashkelon. I am actually looking out that window right there. I can see the lights of the power plant that sends power to Gaza, or used to send power to Gaza. Did you know, were you aware of that? That Israel actually provided most of the electricity for Gaza up until October 7th? And the power plant that provided that power is right on the border fence in southern Israel. And yeah, they paid for it too. That's right, Lou. The people inside Gaza did not pay for that power. It was provided for them for free by Israel. Not only that, Israel provided a large amount of fresh water that they pumped into Gaza every day, and they provided they processed their sewage for them. The sewage processing plant was across the fence here in Israel. So it's pretty crazy that people call it an occupied territory when there were no Israeli soldiers at all inside Gaza after 2005. And they didn't, tell them what they could do and what they couldn't do in Gaza. Gaza was receiving billions of dollars a year in aid from around the world. And the Israelis were providing work for the Gazans. That is, there were something like 60,000 people from Gaza that were allowed to come into Israel to work, where they could earn about 5 times more than they earned working in Gaza. And all of that was an attempt to try to give the Gazans everything they needed to succeed. But the Gazans are so just absolutely overwhelmed by hate that they could not succeed, because when you're focused just on the people that you hate, nothing is going to go well for you in your life. You've got to focus on who you love and try to work to make their lives better, and then things will get better for you. But I want to talk about this idea that the IDF can finish this war anytime soon. A lot of people have been asking me. I get emails from people, and they ask me, how long is this going to go on? And I don't like to make predictions like that. I don't, because there's just too many things that could happen tomorrow that we can't plan for. And making those kinds of predictions is kind of a fool's errand. It's a good way to make myself look stupid, because I'm very likely going to be wrong, because there's just too many things you cannot see about the future. But we can extrapolate in some ways and look at what has happened in other places, in other similar events, and start to get an idea for what's not going to work, or get an idea for what the challenges are going to be. And that's really all we have when you're trying to, fix a problem. The only thing that we as human beings have is our intuition, which is very often based on our experience, which is very often based on making mistakes in the past. So if we look at, say, other conflicts, and we see how they have played out. I just want to give you for example, okay? I've been listening to my wife's great chagrin. I've been listening to this book on audio while we've been driving around Israel. That's about the bomber boys in World War II. It's about the bombing campaign in World War II. Now, my grandfather was Denise asks, where are they putting all the Hamas prisoners? They're putting them in prison. And they have interim camps, and then they put them in prison. And anyway, so my grandfather was a top gunner on a B-17 bomber in England during the Second World War, and then he was a tail gunner on a B-25 in the Korean War. And until I started reading this book, I had no idea how unbelievably dangerous that was. Do you know those guys only had about a 1 in 3 chance of completing their 25 missions over Germany without being killed or wounded or captured? And it, depending on what year it was and what time in the war, sometimes it was much worse than that. Sometimes it was a 1 in 10 chance of making it out intact, right? So in reading about the bombing campaign over Europe, they started out trying to bomb just things that had military significance, and bomb factories, and bomb power plants, oil depots, supply depots, things like that. And first of all, their bombing was not really accurate enough to have the impact that they hoped it would have when they did that. But so they had to sort of get more creative or just drop more bombs in order to try to destroy those things. Thank you very much, MM. I appreciate that. As the war went on in World War II, those bombers went from, we are never going to bomb, specifically target civilians. We have a moral duty to keep from, causing collateral damage, to saying, you know what, this war is never going to end unless we just pound them into dust. Okay? By the end of the war, they were just bombing villages, depots that were holding internally displaced people and refugees. They were bombing everything because they destroyed more or less the German war machine. Yes, I'm referring to Masters of the Air, Nicole. They destroyed more or less the entirety of the German war machine long before the Germans were willing to give up. And so they just kept, they would call up 15-year-olds, and they would call up 65-year-olds, and they just kept sending people to fight, and they wouldn't get the hint that this wasn't gonna, they weren't gonna win. And they were just so zealous and committed to their cause, the Germans were, that they basically had to bomb the people into submission in order to get them to give up. Well, if you think the Germans were zealous for their cause, imagine what, thank you, Edward, that's very kind of you. Imagine what ISIS, how they feel about their cause. Imagine how the Palestinians feel about their cause. Israel has been absolutely decimating Gaza. Wow, thank you, Raphael's Refuge. I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you. If you have a question, feel free to put it up. Israel has been bombing Gaza like there's no tomorrow. They have damaged or destroyed probably a third of all of the structures in Gaza at this point. In places like northern Gaza, it's closer to 2/3. And so it's like, there are no services left. There's no water. There's no power. There's no garbage pickup. There's no sewage processing. There's no anything, especially in northern Gaza. And yet the people are not anywhere close to giving up. I mean, I think if Israel were to go, here comes some, is that fire trucks or? Oh. Well, hang on just a second. I want to see what this is. And they're stopping right here. Oh. I think it must be an ambulance. Somebody had a heart attack or something. So I think if Israel were to carpet bomb Gaza at this point, without regard for human casualties, they would still not break the will of the Palestinian people, because the Palestinian people hate Israel just that much. And they've offered $10,000 rewards if you turn in any information that leads to the recovery of one of our hostages. We'll pay you $10,000, move you out of Gaza, and ensure that you have a safe place to live for the rest of your life. And as far as I know, nobody has taken them up on that. I mean, that tells you something about this conflict, and it's not something good. Okay, the people in Gaza that I'm told, based on informal polling, the people that are in Gaza today would happily re-elect Hamas if they had it to do over again. So how does Israel destroy Hamas if essentially every person in Gaza is amenable to Hamas rule, is more or less happy with having Hamas or some organization like Hamas to rule them, specifically because they hate Israel just that much? It's their version of a giant pulsating middle finger to Israel to support Hamas at this point. Thank you, Deanna. Really appreciate that. And how do you conquer that? How do you even, you understand the position that Israel has put themselves into? Israel has said, our objective here is to destroy Hamas completely, to get rid of Hamas. Hamas will be no more. Well, if there's 2.5 million people in Gaza and virtually all of them are pro-Hamas, and you can't kill those 2.5 million people, then how are you going to get rid of Hamas? Because Hamas is much more than just an organization. It's an idea and an ideology. And so you're not going to kill your way out of this one. So how are you going to do it? I think, and I've said this for a while, what they need to do is they need to change slightly the objective from we must destroy Hamas to we must make it so that Hamas can never be a threat to us again. Because okay, so I want to answer this question. This is a good question. Luann Ferraccioli says, why didn't Israel pay attention to the tunnels long ago? There are documentaries on them. They did pay attention to them long ago. I was here like 7 or 8 years ago, and they were very concerned about the tunnels then. At that point, there were tunnels that were popping up inside Israel. They were tunneling under the fence and coming up in Israeli settlements and killing Israeli people. So I was here, I forget which year that was, but it was 6 or 7 years ago. And I went out to the Gaza Strip, and Israel had these big machines that they were taking out along the border fence. And they had 20 steel drills on the front of this machine that were like 20 or 30 feet long. And they would drill holes down into the ground to try to find these tunnels all along the fence. And when they found a tunnel, when they drilled into a tunnel, they would just put a hose in there and pump it full of concrete and just fill the tunnel full of concrete, or they would drop explosives down there and they would explode the tunnel. So they've known about the tunnels for a long time. They told me, they took me out to the fence and they showed me through binoculars, look over there, you can see the cement trucks coming and going, and all they're doing is they're dumping cement down into those tunnels to create the tunnels. They're building tunnels with all that cement. So they knew that it was happening, and they didn't do anything to speak of about the tunnels inside Gaza. They only stopped them from building tunnels from Gaza into Israel. So that is a good question. Thank you for bringing that up. Gracie Jones says, do you think the fear contributes to the Gaza narrative? Could you clarify that question, Gracie? Fear, who's afraid, and what do you mean by that? why are leaders so hard against Israel, but not standing up against Russia's war against Ukraine? I apologize if I'm asking. Well, the people that are hard against Israel are Russia, for one thing. Russia and Iran, and Russia and Iran are certainly not going to be against the war in Ukraine because they're the ones that are fomenting it and profiting from it, right? I mean, they're the ones that just passed this Security Council resolution. They were the ones that put it forward. The United States this time could have, could have vetoed it, but they didn't. They just threw Israel under the bus. And let me tell you, the people here in Israel are livid about that. They are very, very upset that Israel was thrown under the bus by the United States yesterday. And so they were going to go to the United States with a delegation to sit down and talk to Joe Biden about why, and hear Joe Biden's proposal for why they should not do an operation into Rafah. That was the point of this delegation that was going to the United States. And yesterday, Benjamin Netanyahu said, we're not coming, meaning we are no longer willing to listen to anything you have to say about how we prosecute this war. If you're not going to stand behind us, then you're not one of our allies. And Allison, you make a good point. We need to stand with our allies. When we betray our allies like this, it emboldens our adversaries and it emboldens bad actors around the world. And so it is a very bad thing that we're not standing with Israel right now. Sharon Whitley says, if ISIS-K could attack Moscow with our border open, what about an attack in the USA? Well, that's a self-answering question, Sharon. Of course, they could attack in the United States. And I would say without a doubt, they are planning to attack in the United States. And that what we saw in Russia was a precursor to that. Now, the United States also proved in this attack in Moscow that we have very good intelligence about ISIS-K. So we have people inside ISIS-K apparently who are passing along information about what their plans are. And that should give us some hope that we are actually, maybe one step ahead of ISIS-K. If they are planning a big attack in the United States, we hopefully can dismantle it before it happens. But ISIS-K isn't the only terrorist, group in the world. And we probably don't have people inside all of them. And I would say we have a bigger threat from just absolute, thug criminality in the United States than we do from terrorist events. I mean, you are much, much, much more likely to be a victim of thug violence. I'm saying thug violence because it may or may not be associated with a gang. Most likely it would be. I mean, did you know that gang violence accounts for 80% of all the violence, the gun violence in the United States? Steve Lewis, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate the donation. 80% of the gun violence in the U.S. that is not suicide, is perpetrated by gangs. And that's why, there was a very good point made by Stephen Molyneux, who's an economist and a statistician, who said that he did a whole video about this. 80% of gun violence in the United States is gang violence. So we don't have a gun problem, we have a gang problem. But we don't actually have a gang problem because most of the people that join gangs do so because they don't have a father. And so we don't have a gang problem so much as we have a fatherlessness problem. Hey, Beeper Guy. Beeper Guy just showed up all the way down here in Ashkelon. Yes. Thank you, Beeper Guy. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. So we don't have a gang problem so much as we have a fatherlessness problem. And we don't even have so much a fatherlessness problem as we do a welfare problem, because women in the United States actually get not punished, but rewarded for having more children out of wedlock. Because then if they bring a man into their house and they start cohabitating with a man, even if that guy's the father of their kids or whatever, then they start to lose their welfare benefits. And so we're actually encouraging women to have children out of wedlock, which leads to fatherlessness, which leads to gangs, which leads to gun violence. But I would say that you have a much larger chance, probably at least 400% larger chance of being victimized by thug violence in the United States than you have to be a victim of a terrorist attack. And what's the difference? What's the difference between terrorism and the stuff that we see that BLM is doing? What's the difference between terrorism and the stuff we see Antifa doing? Look, I have covered both terrorist attacks and Antifa riots, and I have come much closer to being victimized myself. I mean, I've literally been assaulted many times at Antifa riots and protests and BLM riots and stuff like that than I have at, going to cover a war, a disaster, or a terrorist attack, okay? So, places like South Chicago, you are more likely to be a victim of violence in South Chicago than you are in Baghdad. You are more likely to be victimized in inner city Baltimore than you are in Kabul. If you were to go to Kabul today, if I had a choice to take my family to Kyiv in Ukraine, or to take them to, take a vacation somehow in downtown San Francisco or Los Angeles or Portland or Seattle or Dallas or Detroit. I could go Minneapolis. I could go on and on and on. Any of those places, I would gladly take my family to Ukraine before I would take them to any of those cities in the United States, because those cities are objectively more dangerous than Kyiv, which is an active war zone. Okay? And this is something to think about. Okay? Now, let's get back to the topic at hand. I'm not sure I was answering questions here from you guys and I got off on that. But when it comes to the IDF wanting to finish the fight in Gaza, that's a commendable objective. But this is no longer a military on military battle, war. This war has now transitioned to become an insurgency. And as the United States saw in Afghanistan and in Iraq, winning an insurgency is very, very difficult. The United States spent $1 billion a week for 20 years running in Afghanistan. Did you hear what I just said? We spent $52 billion a year on average for 20 years in Afghanistan, and we still lost. We lost to a bunch of 7th century cavemen who just outlasted us. That's all they had to do, just outlast us. Well, what can we learn from that in this conflict? What we can learn is that Israel cannot kill its way out of this war. They can't destroy their way out of this war. They can't spend their way out of this war. When you're talking about an insurgency, Israel, the only thing that Hamas has to do now to win is outlast Israel. And they can outlast without spending any money. All they have to do is stop fighting, right? Just stop fighting. And Israel will say, okay, we won, and they'll go away. And then Hamas will pop their head up and go, ha, we're still here. Okay? Now, somebody said they disagree. I'd like to hear how you disagree, because I'd like to encourage you to disagree with me and to, engage with me on that. But I think it's premature, even though, look, Israel has been doing a great job on the kinetic battlefront. They've killed, they say, 13,000 Hamas troops at this point, Hamas soldiers. But Hamas said they had 25,000 to begin with. So there's still more than 10,000 left. And question, does Israel believe their Messiah will save them? Save them from what? From hell, maybe, but from Hamas, no. Now, Israel has greatly reduced the number of troops it's got fighting in Gaza. I don't know if you knew that, but I contacted some of my friends today that were in Gaza. One guy, Duran Kedar, who's a special forces soldier in the reserves. He's been in there a lot, and he's been turned loose now, been let go. We are seeing more military age males, like today when I was downtown. Now, I realized that I was looking around, I was thinking, wow, there's a lot of, like military age guys down here. I wonder what's going on. And then I realized, oh, I was in East Jerusalem, and these are all Palestinian guys. But that brings up another point that I think needs to be made. There are lots and lots of Palestinians living in Jerusalem, living in Israel, not in the West Bank. They're living in Jerusalem. You see them in Old Town Jerusalem. They're running the shops. You see them at our hotel. They were the guy running the front desk, the security guy, the chef this morning at breakfast at our nice 5-star hotel in downtown Jerusalem. He was a Palestinian guy. They were all Palestinians. And in the middle of a war where Israel is fighting Palestinians in Gaza, these people are still going to work in Jerusalem. Did you know that? Does that surprise you? What that tells me is that it is possible for Israelis and Palestinians to get along. The Palestinians have to just not try to kill them. Just don't try to kill them. And you can join their society. Now, when you go from downtown Jerusalem, the Jewish quarter, the Armenian quarter, the Christian quarter, and Matthew disagrees that Kyiv is safer than any U.S. city. I didn't say any U.S. city, but I did name some large metropolitan areas. And if you're talking about crime rate or the likelihood of being the victim of violence, you are much more likely to be the victim of violence in a major American city than you are in Kyiv right now. If you think about it, Kyiv is being rocketed, or they had missiles shot at it every day. They're being bombed by Russia every day. But they have, if you think about it, they have air defense all around Kyiv that shoots down most of the missiles that get shot at Kyiv. So most of the missiles that get shot, Russia might shoot 50 missiles at Kyiv, and 40 to 45 of them will get knocked down. And so they don't hit anything. The other 5 will, a missile like that will blow up a building, okay? Now, Kyiv is a city of 4 million people. So that means that maybe 4 buildings in town are going to get blown up today. And all you have to do is look at the casualty figures. Kyiv is, when one of these missile attacks happens in Kyiv, they'll have maybe 2, maybe 3 people killed. On a really bad day, they'll have 15 or 20 people killed. What's the crime rate? What's the murder rate in some of America's cities? In New Jersey, places like that. The homicide rate is easily that high, if not higher. Okay? Again, I'm not just talking about getting killed. I'm talking about being the victim of violence. Okay? So, look, I spent 6 months in Kyiv. And I had my wife and my daughter there with me. And I had no problem, even with the bombings happening, I had no problem letting them go out, go to the store, go to the restaurant, go to the gym, do what they were doing, because it literally was safer there. There's virtually no crime to speak of in Kyiv. And in America's cities, I don't know if you've been into America's inner cities lately, but I have. And I'll tell you, it is extremely dangerous, like far more dangerous than it is in Kyiv. Look, I'm literally 2 miles from the Gaza Strip right now, and I've got my wife sitting here with me. And I have no problem going out for a walk today. It is objectively safer here in Israel, even with the war on, than it is in any major American city in the United States. No question about that. Okay? There are nice areas of some of those cities. There are safer areas and more dangerous areas, but on average, if you take Chicago on average, the likelihood of you being a victim of violent crime in Chicago is far higher than it would be in northern Iraq, in Erbil. I would gladly take my family on vacation to Erbil before I would take them on vacation to Detroit. It is safer in Erbil. It is safer in Mosul right now. I've been to these places. I'm not just making this stuff up. I have literally been to these places around the world, and it is safer, objectively, statistically safer than most places in the United States. And the thing is, because you live there, you just don't see it. You don't feel it. And I guess the lesson you can take from that is not that you should be scared living where you live in the United States. It's that you should get some context about the actual danger level in the rest of the world. People always say, Chuck, I don't know how you do it, going to all these war zones, and man, you put yourself at so much risk. It's so dangerous in all these places you go. And I say, it's really not as dangerous as you think. This war zone that we're in right now, it's not near as dangerous as it sounds, just because there are missiles flying. There were 8 of them flew day before yesterday right over Ashkelon, heading toward Ashdod. And that's 11 kilometers north of us, right? Would I feel the same if they didn't have the Iron Dome? No, I certainly wouldn't. It would be quite a bit more dangerous if they didn't have the Iron Dome. But they do have the Iron Dome. And so it's not. Kyiv does have a very strong, robust air defense system. And so Kyiv is safer than you think. That's my point. It's not that what the dickens does Israel do? Stop now? Well, no. And this is my question for you. If you were Israel, this is what I wanted to come to in this live. If you were Israel, what would you do? What would you suggest that Israel does in this situation? Now, I'm going to make some suggestions, and I'm not going to say that I'm advising Israel to do this. I'm just going to give some options here. Here's some options that Israel has. Number one, they could get much more brutal against Hamas, which would mean this is what World War II, what they did with the bombing campaign, is they got much, much more brutal as time went on, to the point where they just finally bombed those people into submission. You know that Japan might still be fighting World War II if we had not dropped the nuclear bombs on them. But when we dropped the nuclear bombs on civilian targets and we massacred hundreds of thousands of civilians with the promise that we would continue doing that until there was nothing left of Japan, then Japan saw the writing on the wall and said, we have no choice. We have to give up. So that's one option that Israel could do. They could nuke Gaza. They could start carpet bombing Gaza. They could hit Gaza so hard and start just killing civilians on purpose. They've been doing just the opposite, right? They've been putting themselves at more risk to save civilians. And I'm not suggesting that they do this. I'm saying this is one of their options. No, it's not too close to nuke. That's not true. They could nuke Khan Yunis, and it's not too close. It would have to be a small nuke, but they could do it. But and even without a nuke, they could just carpet bomb and just start killing all the civilians and just say, we are going to hit you harder and harder and harder until you beg us to give up, to surrender to us. Okay, that's one option. What would be the outgrowth of that? Israel would become more of a pariah state than they already are. And they would maybe win the war and lose the peace. They would lose the even wider war, which is the worldwide opinion war, right? The information war. So that's not a good option. And it's not even a feasible option. I mean, that they're not going to do it, right? They're not going to do that. But that is one thing that they could do. The second option would be to follow the advice of the United States and to just declare the war to be over before the enemy finishes fighting. That is called losing. So they could just give up and they could lose. And all of this would have pretty much been for naught, because it just means you've got a continued millions of people on your southern border who want to see you dead and are going to start planning the next October 7th, just like that. That's the second option, and it's not a very good one. The third option would be to redefine what victory looks like. And this is what I say, it's kind of the middle road. It's not, I mean, the whole point of war is that there are no good options. You want to make your enemy have fewer options than you do. But so how does Israel do that for Gaza? Well, the Gazans right now are getting so much sympathy. They're getting sympathy from the United States. They're getting sympathy from Europe. They're getting sympathy from Russia and China and Iran and Turkey and Jordan and Saudi Arabia. And I mean, almost everybody seems to be on Gaza, on the side of the Palestinians in Gaza at this point. Okay? So Israel has to redefine what winning looks like to something that's more compatible with what the rest of the world wants. That's not a good option either, because it means basically you're not going to wipe out Hamas. But they could say, well, we're going to make sure, we're going to go through every single building in Gaza. We're going to destroy every tunnel, and we're going to just to confiscate and destroy every weapon, every explosive, every rocket launcher, everything we find that is in any way remotely offensive from a military standpoint. And then we're going to leave. And we're going to keep an eye on you. And if we find that there is anything like a threat from Gaza, again, then we will mobilize our troops, and we will come in and we will do this whole operation over again. We will go through every single building in Gaza, and we will destroy every building that has anything to do with the military. And then we'll leave, and we'll leave you alone. Now, for me, this seems like the most logical option, because it's an option that does not require a continued presence in Gaza. It allows the rest of the world, hey, do what you want. You want to help Gaza? Great, go for it. Have at it. They keep talking about the fact that Israel is blockading Gaza. Well, they forget about the fact that Gaza has a border with Egypt. And if Egypt wants to, they can open up that border, right? They could allow ships to come in, perhaps. Maybe they could set up a system whereby they search the ships to make sure they don't have weapons on them. But I'd say let them bring in all the weapons they want. Just make it clear to the Palestinians, we just completely rebooted your country. If we detect a threat from your country ever again, we're going to do this again. We will come in and we will reboot your country. Now, RLM keeps saying hostages. This is the fly in the ointment here. The hostages are the non-negotiable for Israel. I've been saying this for a while. What Israel needs to do is to say, we are going to continue with this fight until we get back all of our hostages. All you have to do is release the hostages, and then we can talk about stopping. But until we have our hostages back, we only have 3 words to say to Hamas, release the hostages. Release the hostages. We don't have anything to talk about until you release the hostages. So we're going to continue flattening Gaza, building by building, street by street, tunnel by tunnel, until you release the hostages. And if you won't release them, we will find them eventually, because we're going to go through every square inch of this country, of that whole region, and we're going to destroy and flatten every square inch of it until we get our hostages back. Now, once we have our hostages back, then we will say, okay, now let's talk peace. We will immediately pull all of our troops out of Gaza. We won't leave anybody there, and we're just going to watch you. We're going to keep an eye on you. And if you become a threat to us, then we will come in and we will ruthlessly bulldoze your country into the sand all over again. That's our promise. Well, Lou says, what do you think they did from 2005? Well, they did not exactly do what I'm talking about. They actually, like I said, they gave 60,000 people in Gaza jobs. They provided electricity. They provided water. They provided all of that stuff for the people in Gaza. And all of that got used against them. What if hostages are dead? Well, many of the hostages likely are dead, Jenny. We know that already. It's very likely that maybe up to 30 of the hostages are already dead. Now, if you watched the live I did on CBN's channel yesterday, you know that we broke the news that they found DNA evidence of one of the female hostages, 19-year-old girl, in one of the tunnels, 130 feet underground. And from my understanding of what I read about that, they felt like she had been there recently, and there was like blood evidence that she was in there. I don't know if that means she's wounded or if she's dead, but I think it was fairly fresh. So I don't think all of them are. I don't think all of them are dead. Okay. Now, Lori Hager says, Chuck, I don't agree with you this time. As soon as Israel goes slack, then October 7th will happen again and again, just like they said it would. Okay. So I'm not saying Israel should go slack. I'm saying that, okay, so here, you tell me, what do you think, Lori, should the end state be? How should they finish this thing? Because they're running out of options here. They cannot continue just killing everybody in Gaza. And they're not, it would be very, very difficult for them to get to the point where there cannot be found anyone in Gaza who holds the ideology that Hamas held. Okay? So what I'm saying, what I'm saying is the fight will never end. This insurgency will never end if they are just trying to kill their way out of the problem, because they cannot kill everybody. They can blow up all the tunnels. They can blow up the buildings. They can destroy any military hardware. Okay, so if they do that, if they go through Gaza with a fine-tooth comb and they destroy anything that looks like a weapon, anything that could possibly be used in a military context, they leave them with nothing but even, slingshots, okay? It's going to take the people in Gaza years to build up the ability to be a threat to Israel once again. I don't know that Israel can avoid that. I don't know that there's any way for Israel to avoid having Hamas, having the Palestinians be a threat to them ever again. I mean, look, unless you can do what one commentator said, which is go kill their leaders and convert the rest of them to Christianity. Unless you can do that, there's no way to long-term make the Palestinians not hate you if you're Israel. It's just not going to happen. So you have to start from the premise that these Palestinians are going to continue hating us. That's just all there is to it. Now, as I said, there are Palestinians right now living all over Israel who they may hate Israel, but they're peaceable. And they don't attack Israel. I mean, I was served breakfast this morning by a giant bearded Palestinian man, and he was very kind to my wife and I. So it is possible. But what I'm saying is look, the two-state solution is dead on arrival because Israel doesn't want it and the Palestinians don't want it. So you're not going to get a two-state solution. You're going to have Palestinians who hate you. Now, you could take very extreme measures to not allow Palestinians to teach their children to hate you, like maybe, I don't know, could you say, we are going to take over all the schooling. We're going to bus every kid in Gaza to an Israeli school, and kids in Gaza can only go to school in Israel. And we're going to train them not to hate us. How would that work out? I don't think that's going to work. I don't think the Palestinians would go for that. I think you're just going to have to get used to the fact that Palestinians are going to hate you. And so with that in mind, the only thing that you can do is make them fear you. And if you can't make them fear you by carpet bombing them, then you can go in there and you can just make them a promise, and you can keep your promise. That promise is, we are going, look, stop 12 says you got to find out how they tick. I'm telling you how they tick right now. This is how the Palestinians tick. They understand strength. That's all they understand. Brute force. That is what they respect. Brute force. So if you say, we're no longer going to give you electricity, we're no longer going to give you water, we're no longer going to process your sewage, it's on you now. You don't get to have nice things from us. You cannot come here and work. And we've flattened your country. Now, you can get all the aid you want. We're not going to blockade your seas. We're not going to stop you from going out into Egypt if they won't let you out of there. You're not going to come into Israel. If you cross our fence, we will kill you. Period. I would even go so far as to say they need to set up a 500-yard buffer zone all the way around the fence and say, if you enter that buffer zone, we will kill you. No questions asked. We're not going to bury your body. If you enter that buffer zone, we will shoot you dead and we will leave your body for the birds. Okay? Absolutely brutal. But that's what Israel could do. And if Israel did that, and they said, if we ascertain at any point that you become a threat to us, that you are planning an attack, if you launch a flaming balloon that happens to come over into Israel, if you throw a rock over the fence, we will marshal our forces and we will come into Gaza and we will flatten every building that we deem to be a threat once again, and then we'll pack up and leave again. And we'll let you have it. You can do whatever you want in your country. Gaza belongs to the Palestinians. You can have it. Do whatever you want in there. If the EU wants to give you $10 billion, fine. If you want to take that $10 billion and turn it into missiles and shoot those missiles at Israel, the first missile, one missile comes across into Israel, we will call up 60,000 troops, we will knock down the fence, we will roll into Gaza, and we will flatten every building that we deem to be a threat. And if we kill 10,000 more Palestinians, you will know that we're serious, that we will not accept the threat. See, the mistake that Israel made in the run-up to October 7th is they kept accepting incremental threats to their safety. The Palestinians in Gaza, they were sending these flaming balloons over into Israel. I was here. I reported on it. These fire balloons, and they would set fire to the farmers' fields in Israel. What Israel do? They'd go put out the fires. They would shoot rockets into Israel. What would Israel do? They might shoot back at the site where the rocket was launched from. Proportional response was the watchword, right? Kids would come up to the fence and they'd throw rocks at Israeli soldiers. What did Israeli soldiers do? Nothing. They might shoot some rubber bullets back at them, throw some tear gas, get those kids out there. They would let thousands of people come up and protest right on the fence, throw flaming Molotov cocktails, over the fence, injure Israeli soldiers. Some of them were killed. They would let them sneak across the fence once in a while and murder Israeli citizens. And they were always about, again, this comes from the world body, the proportional response. If I was president of Israel, I would say, to hell with your proportional response. Our response from now on will be anything but proportional. It's not going to be a proportional response. It's going to be an overwhelming response. One rocket comes over that fence. We are coming in there and we will flatten Gaza. And they're going to have to do it. They're going to have to be willing to do it because they'll test that. But after the second time that Israel goes in there and flattens Gaza, some people are going to start to get the hint. Now, Israel, to do that, they don't have to, carpet bomb Gaza. They don't have to kill a bunch of people. They just have to be willing to destroy a lot of property. And that's what they're doing right now anyway. They're destroying a lot of property. And they're just getting crucified in the world. Oh, you're killing the cause, blah. Be like, release the hostages. See, it's just that simple. That's, Bibi Netanyahu, all these politicians, they stand up there, they try to make these great, profound speeches. My speech would be 3 words. Release the hostages. Joe Biden called me on the phone. Don't go into Rafah. Release the hostages. Click. They want us to come to Egypt and talk ceasefire. I'd go sit down and I'd pull out a big card that says, release the hostages, and just sit there with this card. And that's it. I wouldn't say a word. Release the hostages. Once you've released the hostages, then we can talk. Until then, nope. We're going to go building by building, and we're going to destroy Gaza. We're going to take it apart, piece by piece, until we get our hostages back. That's what I would do. All right, well, we've been on for 54 minutes, so if you don't release the Kraken. Okay. Well, yeah, they're playing patty cake. They need to play Battleship. Well, when you just, if they just keep it to release the hostages, then they keep the main issue front and center. They don't talk about aid. They don't talk about, the day after. They don't talk about proportionality. They don't talk, all this stuff is window dressing and political theater. Release the hostages. That's all that matters. Okay? So we ought to make that a hashtag, release the hostages. I think it is already. 3 words. That's all it takes. See, this stuff, is not as complicated as they make it. Okay. Please hit the like button, folks. And if you go over to chuckholton.com, I'm putting up articles over there. We can talk about lots of other stuff over there, not just Israel. I'm in southern Israel right now in Ashkelon. We tried to go out and see where they're bringing aid in today, but we couldn't get past the checkpoints. They have military checkpoints set up about 5 kilometers from the line. And we got right up to that, but they stopped us and turned us around. That was as close as we could get. I did see some military hardware. I did not see damaged military hardware being right outside the war zone. If there was a lot of damage being taken, you would likely see those tanks, armored vehicles, etc., on flatbeds being moved out to repair yards. I did not see that. The only military vehicles I saw appeared to be completely functional. So that tells you something as far as reading between the lines. There were no rockets that came out of Gaza today, but there were drones and rockets and stuff coming out of the north again. So we still have that problem to deal with. I wanted to let you know that we opened up our Israel trip for another 10 people yesterday on the live for CBN. We had over 100 people respond to that said they want to go. So first come, first serve. It's full. We can't take any more people to Israel in October. But we do have a couple of slots available on each of our trips to Armenia. Now listen, folks, if you haven't been to Armenia, if you have Israel on your bucket list, you should definitely have Armenia on your bucket list for all the same reasons. Israel, Steve, is not necessarily dependent on the U.S. for ammo. They get a lot of ammo from the U.S. and they would like to get more, but they can buy ammo from other places in the world. So there are lots of places that Israel can buy armaments from, and they can make a lot more here in Israel than they were before. So I would highly suggest that you think about joining us in Armenia. It's one of the most adventurous places you'll ever go in your life. It's another part of the Holy Land. You'll get to see where Noah parked the ark. You'll get to visit lots of Christian history over there, thousands of years old, really amazing stuff. Great natural wonders. The natural beauty there is unparalleled. The food is great. The people are nice. And you get this cool, like post-Soviet vibe, which makes it feel like you're in a Bond movie. So I highly recommend that. If you're interested in coming along with us to Armenia, we're going first week of May, second week of June, and 6th through the 16th of September. So if you're interested in going along, then, Michael Jan. So if you're interested in going along, give me an email. Give me a shout out on email, hotzoneholton@gmail.com. hotzoneholton@gmail.com. I will communicate with you and send you a link, and you can come with us to Armenia. It's a great place to send your college kid, your high school kid that's graduating, whatever. Those trips to Armenia are going to be awesome. I really think they're going to be better than the trips to Israel. It's a smaller group. We're going to some very adventurous places, and you're going to get to talk about it for the rest of your life. So highly recommend it. Is it 3 through 13th of September?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right about that. Must be somebody who's on the trip. And if you're on the trips and you have not paid your full amount, you've already paid your deposit, but you haven't paid the full amount, you need to do that pretty quick, especially if you're on the May trip, or you're going to lose your slot. So please make sure that you pay for your slot so that we don't have to drop you and let somebody else in. But it's going to be a great trip, and it'll be really fun to get to know some of you guys. I'm getting stopped by people all over the place. Yesterday at 10 o'clock at night, I got stopped in the lobby of my hotel by somebody who's like, I just got done watching you. So that's really cool. What airlines fly to Armenia from Atlanta? What you would do, George, if you're flying to Armenia, is plan to fly to someplace in Europe, like Vienna, Frankfurt, Athens, Warsaw. You can go to Doha or Dubai. and Turkey actually is another one. So any of those, and then from there you can get a flight directly to Yerevan. But it's easier, it's better if you actually get 2 tickets. Luis says, "Are you on the trip?" Yes, absolutely. I will be there on the trip to Armenia, and so will Connie, my wife. And so you can come along and get to know us. We can get to know you. I'm really looking forward to that. And we're going to have some great food. It's all included in the price. It's what is it? 20, I forget, 2,500. I think it's $2,500 for 10 days, all inclusive. That's meals, hotels, transportation, get you into all the places, tickets, and all that sort of stuff, translation, you name it. Okay, we cover it. And you don't have to think about a thing. All you have to do is get yourself there, and we take care of everything after that. We will even help you figure out the routing for how to get there, because I know Armenia is it's not real simple to get to. Now, the other thing you can do is find a direct flight to Tbilisi in Georgia, and then get a $75 hop from there to Yerevan. But what we normally do is we'll fly to some place that we want to go see and have like a vacation before the vacation. So we'll fly to Athens and spend 4 or 5 days in Greece, and then fly from there to Yerevan. Last year we flew to Portugal, and Connie and I spent 5 days in Portugal, which was a blast. It was super awesome. And then we flew from there to Yerevan and had our tour. This year, I don't think we're going to do that, because we're going to be gone from, my idea of a vacation this year is to get to spend a week in my actual home, because I am going to be traveling so much this year, and we're just like getting travel weary already. So anyway, that's it. I highly recommend you come, and thank you very much for watching today. If you have any other questions, send me an email, and please like and subscribe. Look, it's like more than half of the people who watch these things are not subscribed. It doesn't cost anything to hit the subscribe button. You probably won't even know you're subscribed, but it tells YouTube that this is something they ought to show to other people. And so it really helps the growth of the channel. So please go subscribe. And if you already subscribed, go check and make sure you're still subscribed, because I'm told that people are being unsubscribed. So, all right. If you go to chuckholton.com, I'm going to post the links to all 3 trips to Armenia this year. And so you can go to chuckholton.com in about 10 minutes and see the links to that. And then, Armenia is a largely Christian country and is the safest country in Asia. So you're going to like Armenia a lot. Trust me. I'm not kidding. Like, I've been all over the world. I've been everywhere across the planet, and Armenia is one of my favorite places on planet Earth. It is just so cool. So that's why I take people there, because I don't take people anywhere else except now Israel. But you would love Armenia, trust me. Okay? All right. Hope you can come. God bless you.